Hey Orchid fam, how's everybody doing? So today I am applying fungicide, and I thought I would go ahead and talk about that kind of as an update to a video I did last fall where I was talking about the Phyla Sticta, which was the tie disease, the black spots, the raised black kind of diamond-shaped streaky spots that were on some of my vandas. Now, it's that time of year, really around where I live, late May. It's time to go ahead and start treating. This is what I'm using. This is Clary's 336. It is thiophanate methyl. This is a broad spectrum systemic fungicide, and I will say this is pretty pricey, but a little bit goes a long way, and I'll get to that later. Now, I treat every other month to every 3 months with my fungicides now, ever since I had that scare with the Phyla Sticta. It wasn't really a scare, it has started to show up on some of my orchids, so it's important that I keep on top of the spraying, because with the Phyla Sticta, you don't necessarily know that your orchids have it until it's too late. When you see the symptoms, which are those black raised spots, that means that the fungus has lived inside the tissue cells and it has ruptured out its spores, which means that it's already set its spores out to spread. So at that point, it's not too late. You should keep treating, but it means that the orchid's obviously already infected. So I'm trying to be preventative here, and like I said, I've seen symptoms of it being on some of my other orchids, so I have to keep spraying. I'm going to be spraying probably every other month. I might even do low dosage sprayings every month all summer, because it's a nasty disease that I do not want to have taking over my garden. And if you look closely in here, you can kind of see some black spots. I'm not sure if these are from the Phyla Sticta, but you can see down in here if the lighting's right. The spots that are in here, it's not really showing up on camera, do have a slightly discolored center, and they're raised a little bit, which is symptomatic of Phyla Sticta. I have to keep these guys sprayed. In addition to that, the spray also works really well for lots of other funguses, black spots, rots. I also use it on my palms to prevent crown rot. I spray them in the winter time when it's warm enough, and then I give them a few sprays in the early spring, late winter, just to make sure they didn't get any crown rot, because I live in zone 6 and palms don't typically do very well here in the winter time because it's cold, but there are some hardy varieties, but they still need to be treated to be safe. So this has lots of uses, tons and tons and tons of uses. Speaking of its uses, one of the other things that's listed in here commonly throughout, you can go through and look at the different diseases that it's made to treat and how to treat those diseases. And there are several varieties of Fusarium listed in here, which is another reason I'm using this, is to prevent Fusarium. So on using this, first off, gloves, important. It also recommends wearing a mask. I would recommend wearing a mask with any chemical. I'm not, one, because I need to talk into the mic, and two, because I don't have any masks. So I'm just going to be very, very careful, make sure that I'm not downwind while I'm spraying. And I'm wearing shoes. That's important. I have most of my skin covered just to be safe. I'm going to be applying this with a 1 gallon sprayer. It's a little bit tricky because this stuff is dosed out in here on the number of ounces to use per 100 gallons. And I'm using a 1 gallon sprayer. I had to do some math. And here I was able to figure out that it generally doses anywhere from 8 to 16 ounces per 100 gallons at the minimum. And so I went ahead and did the math to break that down to what that would be per gallon. It's going to be roughly at a minimum of 2.36 milliliters per gallon. My measuring device starts around 5 milliliters, so I'm going to be doing roughly half of that. I would prefer to use a measured syringe to get the proper measurement, but I just can't find it. So for now, I'm just going to keep it to a minimum because these are orchids, so they're delicate. I also feel that I should clarify that this treatment method and what I'm talking about when you start your sprayings in May or June, that I'm referring mostly to sympodial orchids, so vandas, and I am going to be spraying my Grammatophyllum. It's also a sympodial orchid. I don't know if this is going to be the same treatment method that you would use with, say, like Cattleyas or Oncidiums. Different types of roots, different growth patterns. I'm not sure. So I am going to guinea pig this with some of my other orchids. It should be fine. I don't know why it would hurt them, and I'm just going to use a lower dosage to be safe. On that note, When trying a new chemical, I do always use, as terrible as it sounds, a sacrificial orchid. And I do have a specific Vanda that has just never grown well for me. It always has problems. So it is always my guinea pig when I'm trying different things. So I did guinea pig this on that Vanda. Alright, so I went ahead, I got my sprayer out. I do make sure I use separate sprayers for separate projects. For fungicides, I have one, and for fertilizer, I have another one. For watering my orchids, I have a separate one. And for insecticides, I use a separate one. I don't really use many weed killers anymore. I've found I just pull them. But when I did, I used a separate one for any type of herbaceous killer. The Cleary's recommends using a water with a pH of 6 to 7. My pH around here is about 8.4. So I remembered that, and I went ahead and I actually dumped everything out and started over again with spring water. So I've got this guy filled up, and then I've gone ahead and I've measured out my fluid. I did put just a little bit extra in there, and I know it looks like it's up to the 5 milliliter point. It's not. It's fairly far below it. But I did go ahead and make sure that it was just a little bit over halfway, because a fair amount of the fluid is going to stick to this. You can see how it's sticky, so I'm going to lose some when I'm doing that. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour that on in there. I might even actually just set this up there and let it run down. So we'll come back when more of that's gone down. Alright, got that in there. When I put the lid on, I want to make a special note. Whenever you start to pressurize your pumps, when you start to go ahead and crank them up and down, make sure that the auto spray is off, because you could end up spraying yourself. You can push this handle down and kind of lock it in place. You don't want to do that, end up accidentally spraying. So I got that in there. I went ahead, shook it up, mixed it up. Just went ahead, gave it a good shake. A lot of the fluid did still stay in the measuring device and the little shot glass, so it's a good thing I measured out a little bit extra. Before you start spraying, I make sure to soak my Vandas. Like, I've probably sprayed them down 7 or 8 times, and I make sure to reapply my sprays before the roots return back to white all of the way, because that defeats the purpose. You want to keep them saturated for a fair amount of time, because they're not going to get watered again today. And the humidity where I am is unusually low. So I want to make sure that these guys are really well hydrated. And I'm going to be cycling through. So once these are dry, they're going to be going back to where they go, and I'm going to be reloading this rack, and I'm spraying all my Sympodial orchids with this. For a project like this, I prefer using a sprayer because I can better control where my chemicals are going. I have pets and animals, so I am going to be careful to make sure that this stays in a concentrated area, and I am making sure that it's away from anything that is edible, away from my dog's water bowls, and I'm going to allow the area to completely dry when I'm done. And even after that, I'm going to go ahead and give the entire area a few rinses before I'll let them back out, just to be safe. So I'm just drenching them from top to bottom, roots and all, just like I would do for watering them. And that's really it. Just want to make sure that it goes into the crevices along the crown, because sometimes there's rot in there. Different diseases do different things, and I have orchids on the other side, so I need to do that too. Make sure all the foliage gets hit, the undersides too. This stuff smells like chemicals, that's for sure. So, done spraying everybody down. I got on the tops, on the undersides, and all the crevices and all those nooks and crannies, and that's it. It's done. I'm going to keep an eye on them, make sure there's no damage. I am also going to kind of scoot these guys out of the direct sun here very, very soon, because I don't know what interaction there will be, and they're getting too much direct sun right now as it is. But on a separate note, why don't we go ahead and mention real quick preventing the diseases to begin with. Now, Vandas, really all your orchids, need proper spacing, and if they're too close together, you risk spreading the disease. So it's not even just being too close together. Air circulation, lots and lots of air circulation helps keep them from getting sick. And proper lighting, lots of sun, make sure that they're getting the right amount of sun. The sun just seems to help bake away diseases. Ultraviolet rays do kill things, so it does make some sense. But there is a fine line. There's a balance that has to be found with sun on your orchids. Like this Vanda over here in the front, you can see has some sun damage because the sun's been shifting this time of year as we approach the change over to summer, and it got a couple days of sun that was too bright for it when it was doing fine for a month or two. Don't keep them too close together. I don't really have a choice because I have too many. I've actually stopped buying Vandas because I don't have anywhere to put them, so it just becomes silly to keep buying things if I don't have anywhere to put them, and they're like on top of each other, which isn't ideal. But if you're in my situation and you have to keep your orchids on top of each other, then spray. Some people don't like the chemicals, but for me, I'm always going to keep doing it. I'm doing it in lower dosages, and I'm trying to be as wise as I can to make sure environmentally I'm not impacting things too greatly. All right, that'll do it. Thanks for watching. I hope there were some helpful tips in here. If anybody else has any comments, anything helpful that they want to share or spread, let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try and put out 2 to 3 videos a week, and I hope everybody's doing well and keep on growing. Bye-bye.